So hey anime fans, the series name is What If Naruto Got Harem with Pokemon, so let's start the series. He had no idea what had happened to the blonde youngster, who was only 7 years old, who was wandering in the wilderness with tears streaming down his cheeks. Or how he got here, but one thing was certain, he had to leave quickly or Pokemon would attack and devour him. He closed his eyes, but it was dark and he couldn't see anything because the trees blocked out all moonlight. He stumbled and fell down a small slope with the amount of effort he was putting into his running, and then he opened his eyes to check his surroundings before examining himself. His knee was scrapped, and while it hurt, it wasn't anything he couldn't bear. After hearing huge explosions coming from his left side, he became curious and decided to find out what it was all about. He was frightened by something more terrifying than the woodland he was in. Two Pokemon were engaged in combat. One had a swan-like body, blue with pink wings that resembled rings and yellow underside, and the other was shadow-like, with a white fog-like head that was hardly visible in the dark. It seemed as though the darkness of the night was his ally, and his shadow stretched to unimaginable lengths. If the number of explosions and the damage to the surrounding area were any indication, those two were unquestionably powerful. The second Pokemon used the well-known move Hyper Beam to strike the Dark One, but it felt terrible to Naruto because he didn't know the exact type. The Dark Pokemon appeared to be already injured from all the fighting and couldn't dodge quickly. 2 rings of white light surrounded the light Pokemon, and then they formed a sphere in front of it and shot it at the already down dark Pokemon. When it was confirmed that the dark type wouldn't get up, it left. He walked slowly towards the dark Pokemon and carefully checked to see if it was still conscious. It was injured, with cuts and bruises all over its body. Naruto carefully took a hanky out of his pocket and began cleaning him, but he realized it was pointless and that he needed some water. He picked up the downed Pokemon and somehow dragged it to the base of the tree and concealed it with some bushes. He then went to find a source of water. He searched for a while before finding what he was looking for, a tiny stream of water. He dipped his hanky and went back to the Pokemon he was hiding, cleaned as many of the wounds as he could, and then went back to the water body. He repeated the process multiple times until he had cleaned all the wounds. He was exhausted from all the running he had done and eventually collapsed next to it, falling asleep almost instantly. He woke up to the sound of some Pokemon chirping, realized it was late in the morning, and signed that he hadn't eaten since lunch yesterday. He needed to find something to eat for himself and the Pokemon, and when it woke up, his dry throat reminded him that he also needed some water. He got up and walked slowly towards the stream of water he had discovered in the night, and now he could truly see how beautiful it looked in the daylight. A few water Pokemon that he didn't recognize were playing in it, and he was lucky to find a large enough hollow log to fill it with water. He followed his plan and discovered some berries and chose to take some with him, hoping they were edible and had no negative effects. When he got back to where he had hidden the dark Pokemon, he decided it was time to wake it up. He hoped it wouldn't be startled to see him, so he took some water from the log and sprayed it on its face. The dark Pokemon woke up with a start but grimaced in pain, realizing that the fight with the other Pokemon had inflicted more damage than it had anticipated. Naturally, the Pokemon looked up to see a child, a human child no less, sitting next to it. It started growling, which made the blonde child nervous. With a threatening tone, it asked, "Are you the one to throw water on my face?" The blonde youngster, who had never encountered a Pokemon with human verbal abilities, was genuinely taken aback by the thing. He yelled, "Wow, you can talk, so cool." The lad really has some lungs on him, the Pokemon thought, its ears ringing so loudly that it was unable to hide them, does it even have ears? It inquired again, what are you doing here? And then, as if the youngster were attempting to conceal it, he looked around and discovered that he was surrounded by bushes. What happened here? Pointing to the hollow log with water and a few berries in his hands, he said, you and some other Pokemon were fighting last night, and it was so cool, but you got injured and lost, and you were unconscious. He struggled to say the big word, so I dragged you here, and I looked around for some water, but didn't want to leave you unprotected, so I hid you in the bushes and then cleaned your wounds, and then I was too tired to do anything, so I slept. He thanked the youngster despite the fact that this was not what he had anticipated. Thank you for the help, but I need to get going, he said as he got to his feet, making some visible effort, and began floating in an unknown direction. Hey, wait up, the youngster said, where are you going, with a worried expression on his face. The black Pokemon was taken aback because it had never encountered a human like that before. Inquiring, what is it to you? The Pokemon, you see I am lost and have no idea where to go, Naruto said, a bit chuckling as he became anxious. The Pokemon chose to repay the favor by guiding him to the closest town. The boy thanked the Pokemon and followed its instructions, but the dark Pokemon turned around and began floating in the opposite direction. A few seconds later, there was a loud scream and numerous flying Pokemon screeching. He sighed and made the decision to assist the little creature that had just helped it. The youngster was already going and didn't even bother to glance back as he charged a dark pulse and shot it at flying-type Pokemon, scattering them. He grumbled and began to follow him covertly. After arriving in the town, the child asked Officer Jenny for the way to Sangem Town, which was home to Professor Rowan's lab. The benevolent officer showed sympathy for the lost boy and dropped him off at his destination. Before the sun set, Naruto was in Professor Rowan's lab. He opened the door quietly, but to his surprise, his adoptive uncle was already there, glaring at him. Professor Rowan may appear intimidating, but he is actually quite kind and mild-tempered, but as soon as the boy's eyes met his, he realized he was in serious trouble. He continued, Naruto, would you explain what happened and where you were since yesterday? In a firm voice rather than his customary soft one, which cemented the agreement and made him officially angry. You see. I was wandering around, chasing a Pokemon when I got lost and didn't know where to go, the boy, now known as Naruto, said, perspiring. He signed and accepted his fate, knowing that he would be severely tongue-lashed. Some time later I ran into some Pokemon and they pointed me towards the nearest town, then Officer Jenny dropped me here, he said, lowering his head. Rowan shook his head, saying that it was not for him to decide and that he would let his mother handle him. He was both delighted that the child had returned safely from wherever he had been lost and furious that Naruto had run recklessly following a Pokemon. I don't know what to do with you, Naruto, so I will let your mother deal with you, said the professor. The blonde went pale at the thought. Although everyone knew his mother, Nurse Joy of Sangem Town, was a good person, Naruto knew she had a hot temper when it came to dealing with him. He had done some quite foolish things in his brief life, and he was ultimately punished for them. Before he could come up with an excuse, Nurse Joy ran in and embraced Naruto. He was about to respond when he saw his mother crying, and he felt like a fool because his mother was so worried about him and he was chasing a Pokemon aimlessly to an unidentified place. His mother held on to him and sobbed for a few more minutes before he calmed down. I'm sorry, Mom, I won't do it again, I'm so sorry, he said gently as he hugged his mother. She said quietly, still sniffing, please don't do that again, Naruto. I don't know what I would do without you. I promise, Mother, I won't, he responded, dabbing at his mother's tears. I know how much you love to learn more about Pokemons, so I have decided, said Nurse Joy, looking at him with her face still wet from tears and her eyes red from all the crying. She took a deep breath to calm her racing nerves. Professor Rowan is going to different regions to learn from different professors and at last will head to Kanto region to study under Professor Oak, and you, Naruto, are going to go with him, she said. Hearing that, the kid and the professor were both taken aback. They couldn't comprehend how she was letting him accompany the professor when she had previously refused. His mother interrupted him before he could finish, saying, "But mother." She exhaled and continued, "No, Naruto, it's not your punishment. I know how much you love Pokemon and want to learn more about them or see a new species, so you will accompany him," she said, giving him another embrace. Naruto accepted the gesture. He said softly, "I will, mother, and thank you," expressing gratitude to his mother. Naruto was well aware of his mother's affection for him and that she never let him leave her sight. The youngster realized that it would be too difficult for her to let him go. Underscore 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 underscore. Sitting in the backyard garden, Naruto watched all the Pokemon play and compete with one another. His mother had always denied him the opportunity to travel throughout the area and learn new things, claiming that he was too young, even though he acknowledged that he was. However, now that he realized his dream was coming true, it felt empty in some way. He didn't realize someone was skulking behind him until it spoke, since he was so absorbed in his thoughts. It inquired, "Something troubling you?" The deep-sounding voice shook Naruto out of his reverie. He turned his head and saw the same Pokemon he had assisted the previous evening. Naruto said, "Why are you here?" and was taken aback to see the black Pokemon once more. It surprised itself with the response, saying, "I was just going my way, when I heard you screaming, and decided to follow you to make sure you reach where you were going safely." Thank you," he murmured, unsure of how to respond. He was thankful that it chose to follow him because, at the very least, finding his hometown would have been impossible. "Name's Naruto, by the way," he said. It stated plainly, "I am Darkrai," without providing any other details about itself. He wanted to know why they were fighting in the first place, so he asked, "Who was the other one you were fighting that night? And why were you fighting?" Although it was painful to acknowledge that he had lost, it was because of his prior battle. "The other Pokemon you saw was Cresselia. We are arch-enemies, we fight each other all the time, and this time I was already wounded from my previous battle, so she thrashed me around," it stated. He inquired, "So, you are trying to say that you would have won if you hadn't been already injured," aware that they might not be able to accept that. It stated plainly, "I don't know, we are equal in power and ability, so the fight could have gone either way," it acknowledged. "So then, why are you so down?" it asked. "I was chasing down some Pokemon, when I got lost, then you know the rest. It's just that my mother was so worried about me. Now she wants me to travel with Uncle Rowan to the different regions and learn more about Pokemon. It has always been my dream, but that's now how I wanted to do it," Naruto said, his voice barely a whisper, but the dark-type Pokemon could clearly hear him. "Maybe, maybe not," it replied, "but time has already passed for you to worry about that. You have been given the chance you wanted all your life. Now the question is, will you take it or let it go?" it began. Naruto thought about the scenario once again. He knew that it wasn't the best position, but why not take advantage of it? He calmed himself by taking a big breath and then grinned. He remarked, "You are right, I shouldn't waste this opportunity," but then he had the brilliant idea, "Hey, why don't you come with me? We could learn so much from each other, and maybe then you could beat that Pokemon." He attempted to persuade the Pokemon to join him, but it saw right through the act and stopped before he could react. The boy, no, Naruto was just like it, a recluse. Yes, he had people who loved him, but he had no friends, and no one could relate to him on such a personal level. He was so eager to make friends, whether they were Pokemon or humans, that he was willing to do anything to win their approval. It said, "Okay, I'll do it." The youngster said, "Thank you," even though he didn't think the Pokemon would accept his offer. It was his first friend in a very long time, in fact, a lifetime. Tomorrow morning, as Naruto was packing his clothes and other essentials for his trip to the other areas, he heard footsteps approaching. He looked up to see his mother carrying something in her hands that was wrapped in present paper along with a few other things. "Hey sweetie, I have some things for you. Here, this is for you," she said, handing him a big object wrapped in gift paper. "And here are some Pokeballs for you, when you are ready to start your journey," she said, trying to look pleased for him with a forced smile. "Well, open it up," she said, pointing to the wrapped object. Naruto was shocked that his mother was giving him a Pokemon egg, let alone thinking about it, until he carefully lifted it up and took off the wrapping to see an egg, more precisely, a Pokemon egg. "I know what you must be thinking, but Professor Rowan are going to be there with you to take care of the egg, so I think I can trust you with such a great responsibility," his mother said, showing how surprised he must have been. "And one more thing, this egg is from the Kalos region, so some professors would like to study it a bit," she added. Unsure of what to say, Naruto simply nodded and expressed his happiness at his mother's deep confidence. He packed up anything extra and picked up the egg before giving his mother a one-armed hug, which the nurse returned with a few tears in her eyes. They stayed in that position for almost a minute before making their way to Professor Rowan's lab. The mother-son pair arrived at the lab a little while later, walking in pleasant silence. Professor Rowan was already there with another daughter who appeared to be 10 years old. "Hey there Naruto, Nurse Joy," the professor said, waving his hand as he saw both Naruto and Nurse Joy arriving. Joy smiled slightly and Naruto waved back, but the child said, "Hello Uncle Rowan, who is she?" pointing to the blonde who was wearing a yellow dress. He was never really good at distinguishing their different clothes apart. "Naruto, it's impolite to point," Nurse Joy groaned briefly before turning to face the girl. "I'm sorry, looks like I still have to teach him some manners," she said, giving him a scowl that made him perspire. "Naruto, apologize, now," she said. "I am sorry," Naruto murmured, bowing his head immediately. It was simpler to simply agree with his mother than to face punishment later. "I'm Cynthia, I'm just starting as a trainer," the girl said, smiling at him without seeming to heed his earlier rudeness. After giving her a long look and grinning back, Naruto asked the other blonde, "So have you already decided which Pokemon you are going to choose?" "I'm not here to get a Pokemon, you see, I already have one," showing him her Pokeball. "I'm here to register as trainer and then be off on my way," even though it wasn't common, Naruto wasn't overly shocked to learn that. "So you already have a Pokemon huh, can I see it?" he asked. Cynthia grinned at his excitement and produced a Pokeball. She pushed a button on the table tennis-sized ball, which quickly grew to baseball size and released a red light. "Come on out Jibble," she said, and the ground-slash-dragon-type Pokemon emerged. Naruto was thrilled to see the pseudo-legendary type Pokemon for the first time. Although he frequently saw them in the wild, he was rarely allowed to go out alone. The words, "Wow, so cool," he said. The tiny Pokemon made a joyful sound and continued to hop. She remarked, "I'm glad you think so," after noticing a Pokemon egg in his hand. "It seems you have a Pokemon egg, and the one I'm not familiar with," she added. Naruto grinned broadly at her and said, "It's from the Kalos region, even I am not sure which Pokemon will come out of it," as he was always delighted to discuss Pokemon. "Now Cynthia, you are all set, from now on you are a registered trainer," the professor remarked with a smile as he emerged from the room or lab, whatever it was, and handed Cynthia her Pokédex, which was dark blue and purple in hue. Cynthia took the gadget, and it was turned on right away. "Hi, I'm a Pokédex programmed by Professor Rowan for Pokemon trainer Cynthia of the town of Celestic. My function is to provide Cynthia with information and advice regarding Pokemon and their training. If lost or stolen, I cannot be replaced," the device's voice said. After closing the handheld gadget and putting it in her pocket with 5 other Pokeballs, Cynthia put Gibble back in his Pokeball, said him farewell, and departed. After a while of gazing at her back, Naruto made the snap decision, "I too am going to become a trainer soon, well as soon as I can, that is, I'm sure you would. Now are you ready for your journey?" Professor Rowan said with a smile. "I'm ready when you are," replied Naruto, who was practically leaping with delight. Without wasting any more time, Rowan bid farewell to his assistants and gave them some last-minute instructions and advice. He picked up his bag and headed for the car that was waiting for them outside. The Pokemon professor got into the car, and Naruto immediately joined him on the second seat. Both of them said goodbye to their friends, their mothers, in Naruto's case, and their assistants, in the professor's case. Nurse Joy ceased waving as the automobile eventually sped out of sight and headed to the Pokemon Center. "Where are we going, Uncle Rowan?" was the last question Naruto asked after they had been driving for a couple hours at least. "We are first going to Celestic Town. I have to collect some research documents, and then to Hearthome City, where we will take the plane to the Hoenn region," Rowan responded, maintaining his attention on the task at hand. "I thought we were going to Kanto region because you wanted to study under Professor Oak," the blonde said, startled. Then replied, "Yes, we will go there, eventually, but first, we will make a few stops, along the way in each region, so I can meet different professors and share knowledge among us," with a grin on his face. "Don't worry Naruto, think of this as an opportunity. You will learn a lot about Pokemon of different regions and what the professors of the region specializes in." The idea of learning more about Pokemon excited Naruto, but he also preferred to learn by doing rather than by reading books. He remained silent for the remainder of the journey, carefully handling and examining the egg that was given to him. It was different from any other egg he had ever seen, and while learning from Uncle Rowan, he had seen many of them. His mother did say that it was from the Kalos region, but Naruto took this as a challenge, determined to learn everything he could about the egg and the Pokemon, even if it meant traveling to the area himself. The blonde was taken aback when he realized that he already somehow knew whose egg this was, but he shook his head, saying that he would consider this at a later time because they had already arrived at their destination. Naruto was so absorbed in his thoughts that he didn't notice when the information about the Pokemon and the egg began to flow in his head. His eyes briefly turned red, but neither of them noticed. Underscore 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 underscore. After a while, traveling to Harem City, Professor Carolina, whom Naruto later discovered was Cynthia's grandmother and the person who gave her gibble, was introduced to him. She was frank, loved her grandma dearly, and was quite proud of her. The professor and the blonde immediately set out on their actual voyage after Professor Rowan wasted no time in obtaining the documents he needed. They were currently traveling to Harem City, from whence they would board an airplane to the Hoenn region. After several hours of driving, they eventually reached their destination. Since it was still a few hours before dusk, Naruto made the decision to have a quick look around the town. Harem City, which Naruto was aware was the 5th largest city in the world, was a quiet clearing a short stroll from the main road. He sat down against a tree and selected a sandwich that his mother had prepared for him before the dark Pokemon suddenly materialized in front of him. He said, "So this is where you were." Naruto was initially shocked but soon calmed down after realizing it was only Darkrai. He offered the Pokemon his other sandwich and said, "Yeah, I wanted some peace and a break from all the traveling," which the Pokemon accepted. They chose to investigate a loud noise they heard coming from a distance while they were both sitting quietly. A Chimchar was being attacked by a number of Zangoose. He was going to intervene when the small fire type used his ability Blaze and charged a super-powered flame wheel, which killed nearly all of them but left 2 alive and growling at it. Chimchar was too exhausted to continue and was hurt, and the Zangoose was about to attack him when he yelled, "Darkrai, Dark Pulse." Unaware of the reason, the Dark type obeyed the boy's orders and scared the remaining normal type Pokemon into running away by firing the Dark Pulse at them. When Naruto saw that Chimchar was flinching, he lifted his hand to indicate that he would not harm it, picked it up carefully from the ground, and hurried to the closest Pokemon Center. The people gave him strange stares when they saw him carrying a wounded Pokemon. After a little while, he arrived at Harem City Pokemon Center and went straight to Nurse Joy. "Hey, Nurse Joy," he was nearly shouting, "I found this Chimchar like this, can you please help him?" "Wait here," was all Nurse Joy replied to him before taking the Pokemon out of his palm and heading straight to the hospital room. The boy waited for a while before Nurse Joy showed up with Chimchar. She smiled and said, "Your Chimchar is fine, he wasn't injured much but was very tired after using Blaze. All you have to do now is take it easy for a day or two and he can finally begin training again." Naruto released a sigh of relief upon hearing this, but the pink-haired nurse scowled and said, "Aren't you too young to be a Pokemon trainer though?" Naruto laughed and responded, "It's not really my Pokemon, as I am not a trainer yet, but I found him at a state like this and immediately bring him to the Pokemon Center." She jokingly said, "So now what are you going to do with him, oh dear nephew of mine?" That shocked Naruto. "Your nephew? You know about me?" he asked. "Of course silly, all of us Joy know about you, and why wouldn't we? One of our sisters has a son," the nurse said, laughing at his expression. Naruto grinned at that. He wasn't sure why, but the idea of his extended family brought him such joy, as if it were something he had always desired. However, he knew he was never alone, so these kinds of thoughts could occasionally be rather perplexing. "So, do all of the Nurse Joy know me, or just this region's?" he inquired. The nurse gave him a genuine warm smile before responding, "I don't know," admitting, "but I think all of the Sinnoh region's Nurse Joy know you. You will have to find out for yourself, I guess." She then pointed to the chimp Pokemon and asked, "So what are you going to do with him?" He turned to face the fire-type Pokemon and asked, "Do you want to come with us? I'm not a Pokemon trainer yet, but I'm sure Uncle Rowan wouldn't mind him coming with us, if he really wants to." The little Pokemon accepted without any hesitation because he was so delighted that someone was asking him to join them. Naruto then took a Pokeball out of his backpack and caught Chimchar. "Well, now that's out of the way, I really need to get going or Uncle Rowan would be worried about me. It was nice meeting you, Aunt Joy," he replied. Naruto was somewhat shocked as the nurse lowered herself to his level and gave him a hug, but he quickly reciprocated the embrace. "Bye," she uttered quietly. The boy grinned, nodded, and walked away. He was thinking deeply as he made his way back to the hotel where he would spend the night with his uncle. He debated whether or not to tell him about the Pokemon he had caught, but ultimately decided against it because, if he did, he would not know until they got to Hoenn, he hoped. Naruto was prepared to jump off the plane after more than 4 hours if it didn't land soon. Luckily, the plane landed a short while later, and Naruto quickly left the flying machine. It wasn't enjoyable to sit around for 4 hours doing nothing, but at least he had some books on Hoenn Pokemon, which was helpful even though it wasn't his favorite pastime. Both the blonde lad and the professor from Sinnoh stepped off the plane, and Professor Birch was waiting for them in his SUV. The professor waved his hand and grinned at the sight of his colleague. The blonde was still holding on to the Pokemon egg that was in the incubator. He didn't know how he knew what Pokemon's egg was that. Professor Rowan had asked his colleague from the Kalos region and had gathered all the data of their regional Pokédex, and he now knew that it was a Froakie egg. Professor Birch, who Naruto noticed was quite casual, was wearing khaki shorts and a dark blue t-shirt underneath his usual lab coats. He greeted them both and motioned them to hop in. He didn't even know that Uncle Rowan had to shake him to get him to stop thinking when they arrived at Professor Birch's lab. He shook his head and followed them inside, where Professor Birch's assistant was waiting to greet them. Naruto put down his backpack and sat on the bed that he had been given for the duration of his stay in Hoenn. He took out Chimchar's Pokeball and made up his mind about what to do next because Uncle Rowan would undoubtedly discover him eventually and there was no use in hiding him. He wanted to train the fire-type Pokemon so that he would be prepared for his journey when the time came, so he pressed the button on the Pokeball and called him out because he had to feed him after all. The little fire-type glanced about before focusing on his blonde trainer. His stomach was growling right now, and he grumbled because he hadn't eaten much before or during the trip. His Pokemon nodded and trailed his trainer out of the room, saying, "Let's go and get something to eat, Chimchar." They observed Joshua, Professor Birch's assistant, feeding the new trainer of the Hoenn area the starter Pokemon. Attracting the assistant's attention, he requested, "Mr. Joshua, can you give my Chimchar and me some food too?" "Of course, Naruto. By the way, I haven't seen that Pokemon before. Who is it?" Joshua said, grinning at the young boy and nodding. He then grabbed a bowl out of the compartment, filled it with Pokemon food, and set it in front of the fire type. As he said, he is Chimchar, a fire-type Pokemon. He is one of the starter of the Sinnoh region, along with grass-type Turtwig and water-type Piplup. Naruto gestured for the chimp Pokemon to approach the meal. Joshua was observing the Pokemon closely. Like everyone else in his line of work, he was interested in learning more about the various species. He wanted to become an expert in Pokemon habitat and behavior, which is why he became Professor Birch's assistant. Naruto was also observing the starter Pokemon of the Hoenn region. If he was correct, they were Torchic, a fire-type Pokemon, Trico, a grass-type Pokemon, and Mudkip, a water-type Pokemon. He continued to watch them until his stomach cried out for his attention a second time, and he sighed once more. He remarked, "I think I too need some food." After all, the youngster had asked Joshua for food for both himself and his Pokemon. "Just give me a second and I will get you something to eat," Joshua said, trembling. He and Chimchar decided to go exploring after a brief lunch. He came to a pond and thought it would be an excellent spot for his training because there was a lot of water there and water would be available in an emergency. The fire type nodded and accompanied his trainer. "All right, Chimchar, it's time for your training," he stated. "To build up stamina, you and I are going to run several laps around this lake before we focus on your move set." Both of them decided to take a little rest after finishing 10 circuits around the lake because they were exhausted. Naruto took some berries out of his pockets and handed them to Chimchar. He added, "It will help you regain your energy," and the Pokemon ate them wearily. He felt some of his vitality come back right away and gradually fill him up. The fire type nodded and prepared for a tiresome workout. "Now why don't we work on your moves?" After a few hours, evening together with the fire-type Pokemon, Naruto practiced Kaimakar's fire-type moves, such as Ember and Flamethrower, as well as his dig. Needless to say, he made significant progress. When they were both so exhausted that even walking was exhausting, they decided to call it a day. Naruto saw that the sun was going down and decided it was time to go back. He was pleased with his progress in a single day, remembering Chimchar from his Pokeball. When he arrived at the lab, he saw that Professor Birch and Rowan had returned and were speaking to Joshua, while the assistant was discussing him, specifically his Chimchar. Naruto sighed, deciding it was time for another tongue lashing, and he got ready to enter the lab. "Naruto, Joshua was telling me about you and your Chimchar. Mind telling me when and how exactly you got a Pokemon?" Rowan said, noticing him right away and approaching him as if to demand an explanation. "You see, I was just walking in the little forest in Harem City, when I found him injured and lying on the ground, so I decided to help him out and took him to a Pokemon Center. After that he chose to follow me, so I thought why not, and here he is," Naruto said cheerfully as he pulled out his Pokeball and called out his Pokemon. Naruto swallowed because Uncle Rowan's tone made him uneasy. He rubbed the back of his head and laughed a little. The young Pokemon blinked, perplexed, wondering why his trainer had called him out. "Char," he gestured to another professor and his assistant, saying, "Meet Uncle Rowan Chimchar, and they are Professor Birch and Mr. Joshua." Professor Birch and Joshua returned the ape Pokemon's small wave of his hand in greeting, but Professor Rowan. "And why is this the first time I had heard about him? I thought if you knew about him, you wouldn't let me keep him," Naruto said, lowering his head. "Naruto, if he wants to be so much with you then you can keep him," the elderly Pokemon professor sighed. "But keep in mind that it is a great responsibility and you will have to take care of his every need." "Of course I will take care of him, isn't that right Chimchar?" Naruto said as his expression brightened quickly, as if a switch had been turned on. "Char Chimchar," his trainer said, and Chimchar nodded joyfully, clearly pleased. "Okay, you can keep him," Rowan said, grinning at the young boy's excitement. "Yada," the child said joyfully as he raised his hand in the air, a move that his Pokemon mimicked. Underscore 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 underscore. Underscore 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 after a few days, according to Naruto, his studies and training in Harem were going well, and he couldn't be happier with the way things were going. He would study under Professor Birch in the morning, play with Chimchar in the wild in the afternoon, and train him in the evening. Darkrai occasionally visited before vanishing to Arceus, but he did assist in training Chimchar because he was the more seasoned one. His Chimchar had already mastered Brick Break and Flame Charge and was currently working on Overheat. He discovered that he was on level 12 and prepared to advance after 2 more levels after using Joshua's Pokédex to track his progress. He had told his Pokémon, "Now, why don't we go fight some wild Pokémon? It will not only give you some experience but also the push needed to evolve," and the Pokémon had grinned and nodded contentedly. That was essentially what they planned to do today. When they were at last free for the day, they went in search of some wild Pokémon after playing in the afternoon and completing the assigned homework. While searching for wild Pokémon, they came across some flying time Pokémon but felt they were too far away to target. They also came across a pond and saw a wild Mudkip sitting peacefully, sleeping. The little fire type appeared anxious, but Naruto felt a bit guilty since he wanted to expand his squad by catching a Pokémon. "Don't be like that, I know it's a fire type but we have trained a lot to lose now," Naruto said. Before Naruto gave the order for his Pokémon to attack, they came rather close. Flamethrower, Chimp Pokémon did not take well to being attacked and returned with a water gun attack when a torrent of flame from its lips and made direct contact with the water-type Pokémon. Chimchar dodged it with Dig, then Brick Break. When Chimchar vanished below, the water-type searched the area for the fire-type. The Pokémon emerged from the water-type side and struck it forcefully with a Brick Break. Now Flamethrower again. Chimchar attempted his signature move once more, but Mudkip showed greater fortitude than they initially believed and responded with a far more powerful water cannon that not only put out the flames but also managed to strike the fire type critically. "Chimchar, are you okay?" he almost burst out crying. Despite appearing hurt, the fire type got up, his will to win driving him to push himself past his breaking point. Chimchar was the Pokémon's response to his question. "All right, Chimchar, we can still win this, are you ready?" This Mudkip is much more resilient than it appears. Although Flamethrower did not deal much damage, it was struck directly by Brick Break and reacted quickly enough to block another one. "What should I do now?" Chimchar Ember then Flamethrower. Chimchar threw out a variety of embers and received another water cannon in return. The fire continued to burn and intensify the attack, and steam rose as a result of the exchange, reducing visibility. Now Flame Wheel, his Pokémon let out a cry of approval and charged at the bewildered water type. Although Mudkip couldn't see where his opponent was coming from, the mud was flying in all directions. One of them did hit Chimchar and made him stop. Luckily, the damage was lessened because he was using a flame wheel, but it was still effective. The stem that was there was gradually fading, and his Pokémon was once again visible. Naruto gritted his teeth because this was much more difficult than he had anticipated. They trained, played, and learned new moves, but none of them were sufficient to defeat a single Pokémon. They were certainly at a type disadvantage, but that was not all, as numerous trainers had demonstrated in the past, which he had seen on TV. What can he do now? Chimchar was too exhausted, and he was suffering a lot of damage as the fight went on. "I need to come up with something quickly, or else I will lose." He searched for anything he could do to get an advantage, but nothing came to him. He was quickly running out of options when an idea struck him. "Chimchar, use area-wide flamethrower and cover the whole ground," said Naruto. The small fire type did just that, and the entire area was engulfed in flames. Mudkip attempted to extinguish the flames with his own water gun, but Chimchar had already overheated, which infuriated the normally placid Pokémon, which then targeted the fire-type Pokémon with mud slaps. He yelled, "Dodge Chimchar!" This clever Mudkip was working against him with his own method. The little fire type was floored as Chimchar avoided the mud slap but was struck by a water cannon that was aimed at him. "Chimchar, are you alright?" The brunette said, "Get up, I know you can do it, we have trained a lot to lose here." After hearing his trainer's words of encouragement, Chimchar shakily dropped to his knees. His will to win drove him to the edge of his abilities, and he suddenly began glowing. His form altered as fresh power surged through his body, and he slightly expanded in size. He tried a few punches and tested out his arms. Naruto was fascinated by everything that was happening to him, including how his Chimchar finally changed, how his form altered, how he grew taller, and how he was attempting a new attack that he recognized right away as Mach Punch. "Alright Monferno, you learned a new move, let's try it out, Mach Punch," said Naruto. Monferno's speed appeared to have increased as well, as he arrived at Mudkip much more quickly than before and used Mach Punch to hit the water-type Pokémon. The mud fish Pokémon was flung back a few feet, and the boy wasted no time in throwing a Pokeball, which struck the water-type Pokémon and sucked it inside. Naruto watched in anticipation as the ball clicked a few times. Ding! When the fire type abruptly passed out from exhaustion, Naruto gave him a small smile, put him back in his Pokeball, and rushed in the direction of the lab. With that, the blonde had successfully captured his first Pokémon, and both the Pokémon and his trainer bounced around in delight. Joshua was ministering to the Pokémon and taking care of the lab as normal, in place of Professor Birch and Rowan. He was too excited to calm down and exclaimed, "Mr. Joshua!" shocking the assistant and a couple of the Pokémon present. "Guess what, my Chimchar evolved and I caught a Mudkip." Even while Joshua liked to watch and care for Pokémon, he was aware that occasionally fighting them might be just as difficult. The animated 7-year-old pushed him from his reverie. The blonde youngster said, "Mr. Joshua, could you please check them if they are fine?" "Of course Naruto, just give me the Pokeballs," he said, taking the Pokeballs from the 7-year-old and heading for the medical room, with the boy following. They began teaching him the fundamentals of first aid after observing how quickly he picked them up, so Naruto was permitted in the medical room as long as nothing serious was happening and he was with someone. When Joshua checked them, they were healthy and well. Pokémon could endure much more than minor wounds and bruises, so they would be as good as rain in the morning, and their fatigue would also be gone. "They are fine, Naruto, and will be ready to train again in the morning." "Oh yeah, can you check their level too?" "Sure, Naruto, just give me a minute," he said, removing a gadget that resembled Pokédex but was only given to professors and their assistants so they could determine whether a Pokémon had been captured or not. He first scanned his newly evolved Monferno, and a murmured Monferno, the playful Pokémon and the evolved form of Chimchar. It controls its flaming tail to keep its opponent at an ideal distance when battling. This Pokémon is male, level 15, and known moves are Scratch, Ember, Mach Punch, Flame Wheel, Flamethrower, Fire Spin, Overheat and Brick Break. It has ability Blaze, Naruto said. "Wonderful. What about the other Pokémon?" Joshua looked at his second Pokémon and the same voice before saying, "Mudkip, the mud fish Pokémon." Mudkip uses the sensitive radar receptors on its head fin to determine what's going on around it. In a pinch, it can brandish enough power to crush rocks. This Pokémon is male, level 12, and known moves are Tackle, Growl, Mud Slap and Water Gun. It has ability Torrent. This is one good Mudkip you got there, Naruto. It is healthy and will be able to join you in your training," said Joshua. In addition to inviting Professor Birch, Rowan, and his assistant to join him in celebrating his successful capture of his first Pokémon, after a battle, that is, Naruto, being the exuberant one, toasted his victory with his favorite food, ramen. Underscore 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 underscore. A whole month later, Hoen's third month begins. It had only been a few days since Naruto had caught Mudkip, who joined them for their afternoon games and evening trainings. Darkrai continued to visit them occasionally and assist both Chimchar and Mudkip with their training. Needless to say, the Mudfish Pokémon was terrified when he first saw the Dark type. Every Pokémon in the wild is aware of legendary Pokémon, which helped both Monferno and Mudkip learn new moves and perfect their existing ones. Monferno had mastered Overheat, learned Double Team, and was working on Low Sweep. He had already learned Low Sweep, but it was difficult to use it in combat. Mudkip had learned Whirlpool and was working on Hydro Pump. With the aid of Naruto's training regimen, they were both improving their speed and overall attack power. A few days after capturing Mudkip, the egg Naruto's mother had given him hatched. As anticipated, it was Froakie, the water-type starter of the Kalos region. Like all of Naruto's other Pokémon, he was male and joined him in their afternoon games with Mudkip, Monferno, and Naruto, but Naruto forbade him from training with them in the evening because he was still too young. Unbeknownst to Naruto, Froakie was learning Bubble behind his back. Their training was progressing well, and with Darkrai occasionally lending a hand, they were making good progress. Naruto never neglected his studies despite playing games, training Pokémon, and doing a lot of other tasks. His intelligence and knowledge shocked both Pokémon Professor Birch and his assistant Joshua. He was incredibly knowledgeable for his age and took excellent care of every Pokémon he encountered, not just his own. While Froakie was playing behind them, Monferno and Mudkip stood attentively as Naruto addressed his team. "You know, my dream has always been to not only become a Pokémon master but to learn as much about them as possible. While acquiring that amount of knowledge will take a lot of time, I will start my Pokémon journey when I am 10 years old. To become a Pokémon master I need to have a team of at least 6 Pokémons to take part in any league. So we are going to add another one to our growing family. I have already decided which one I am going to catch. This Pokémon is grass type and live in a tree. I know which, so let's go and catch it." Following Naruto to the tiny woodland that surrounded the lab, both of his Pokémon gave their affirmations in different ways. They arrived at a tree. Well, to say that it was a tree would be an understatement. That was enormous, and there weren't many grass-type Pokémon of the same kind living there. He pointed to the grass type and said, "You see that Pokémon?" Both of his Pokémon shook their heads in agreement. "This is Trico. Like you, it is given to newbie trainers, along with fire-type Torchic, and we are going to catch it," he said without the slightest doubt. His 2 Pokémon were self-assured and loved their trainer enough to put in a lot of effort for him. "All right, Monferno, prepare for your second battle." The Pokémon of the firefighting type was thrilled about the chance to engage in combat. To get their attention, he shouted, "Hey Trico! My name is Naruto and I want to battle one of you to catch you. Is anyone willing to cooperate?" he inquired. The most of them laughed at the boy's declaration and rejected him, but one accepted his challenge. The Trico appeared youthful in comparison to the other members of his tribe and was holding a tree branch in his mouth like a toothpick. With a nod, the jovial Pokemon who enjoyed fighting, "You ready, Monferno?" The flame in his tail grew more intense. Monferno start with Flamethrower. Instead of responding with words, the part fire Pokemon let off a stream of flames, which were hotter and bigger than they were when he was Chimchar. Trico was anxious because, although he desired a good challenge, he was unaware of how strong and quick the attack would be. He attempted to evade but was caught in some of the flames, and because he was a grass-type Pokemon, he incurred more damage from the fire. Monferno, now Mach Punch, with his palm glowing with electricity, Monferno dashed at the grass-type. It was too slow to avoid and had already taken damage from Flamethrower. A direct hit from the Mach Punch sent him flying onto the tree, but it made an attempt to rise up, but everyone there could see he was on his last legs. Naruto was inspired by Trico's resolve and made the decision to stop the fight fast in order to prevent more harm to him. Since using a fire-based attack would seriously harm both the target and the surrounding area, his choice was clear. Monferno, get in close and finish it with dual Mach Punch. Monferno, Naruto threw the Pokeball on the floored grass type, swallowing it in red light, and the ball barely chimed twice before becoming motionless, indicating the capture. The dual fire-fighting type Pokemon approached and struck the grass type with Mach Punch with both hands, which was strong enough to knock it out. After thanking his Monferno and picking up the Pokeball, Naruto returned to the lab. This time, and most likely for the first time since they arrived, both professors were in the lab rather than out in the wild, watching Pokemon. They saw him arrive with a new Pokeball in his hand and both of his Pokemon on his side, and it doesn't take a genius to figure out the rest. "Now which Pokemon have you caught, Naruto?" Professor Rowan groaned. With pride, Naruto pressed the button and yelled, "Come on out, Trico," at his just captured Pokemon. "Well, he do needs a checkup," said the Hoenn grass starter, who was still a little scorched and exhausted from the struggle. Bircha's small chuckle was echoed by Joshua's small laugh, Uncle Rowan's broad smile, and Naruto's smile. This time, Professor Birch said, "You are right, let's patch him up." Naruto asked, "Mr. Joshua, will you scan it with your device?" The assistant said, "Sure, Naruto, just give me his Pokeball, will you?" When it detected him, a mechanical voice blasted out, "Trico, the wood gecko Pokemon. Trico are able to climb smooth vertical walls and use their thick tail to attack opponents. Since Trico build their nests in large trees, it is said that those trees will live a very long life. This Pokemon is male and is at level 7, its known move is Pound and ability is Overgrow. It seems that this Pokemon is fairly young. Where did you find him, Naruto?" asked Uncle Rowan. "I wanted to have a Trico, ever since I have laid my eyes on one, and I know the one here would be reserved for a trainer, so I got out into the wild, with Monferno and Mudkip and caught him. He barely put up a fight against Monferno, he beat him without even trying," Professor Rowan stated. "Well, as I said, he is fairly young. He still has a lot to learn." After the grass type was fully bandaged and had eaten, he put him back in his Pokeball and went to his room to get ready for the next day. "Yes, you are right," the boy said, but he got some serious determination. He got up even when he took a direct hit from Monferno's Mach Punch. Underscore 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 next day. training session in the evening. All of Naruto's Pokemon were in their Pokeballs as he made his way to his regular evening training spot. As soon as he arrived at the clearing, Naruto grabbed every Pokeball and called them out. "Alright, everyone, time for evening training session. This time both Froakie and Trico will be joining us. Monferno, I want you to teach Trico some fighting time moves." "Alright, all know is pound. After he has learned Brick Break we will start working on his speed." Monferno was the false salute that the fire type gave him in a humorous manner. Naruto's eye twitched, but he ignored it. Mudkip nodded and began training with the Bubble Frog Pokemon. "Mudkip, you help Froakie learn some water-type moves," he said. After a few hours, Trico and Froakie were beginning to understand the moves they had been taught. While Trico was able to cover his hand with white energy, he struggled to keep it that way, and Froakie was unable to channel enough strength to activate Hydro Pump. He was reading a book while sitting beneath a tree. If there was one thing that was different from studying from professors in school, it was that the professors here administered examinations all the time, making it more difficult for him to keep his grades up. He was also monitoring his Pokemon, noting his progress. He was pleased with their progress. They trained every day to get better, and occasionally Naruto assisted them with their assignments. A voice whispered almost close to his ear, startling him because he was so engrossed in his reading. The Dark-type Pokemon inquired, "What are you reading?" In an attempt to soothe him, Naruto leaped from his position and placed his hand on his heart. "How many times I have told you not to do that?" he cried. "I swear you love spooking me. And for your information, I have a test in few days." Although it didn't appear on his face, the Dark-type Pokemon was amused. It said, "You caught a new Pokemon," Naruto remarked. "Yeah, I did, just yesterday in fact," while seeing the Grass-type Pokemon, who was having difficulty performing the assigned move. He passed out from weariness but continued to force himself to stand. "He is still very young, though he has some determination," Naruto commented. His single grass type responded to his shout, "Hey Trico. Why don't you take a break? Come over here, I want you to meet someone," he said. Trico moved closer to him despite not knowing to whom his trainer was speaking. "Trico, this is Darkrai. He is my friend from the Sinnoh region and decided to travel with us." Trico simply stood there composedly and nodded in greeting, unaware of the legendary Dark type because he was still very young. Darkrai nodded back. "Someone is coming, I have to go," it stated. Trico was now amazed because, at the very least, he had never heard of a Pokemon with human speech that wasn't psychic. Naruto soon realized it was Joshua when he turned. From a distance, he said, "Hey Naruto, it's time to head back." The youngster grabbed his book and gestured for his Pokemon to follow. Underscore 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 time skip. 2 days before to Hoenn's departure. Since Naruto had arrived in Hoenn with Professor Rowan, the year was drawing to a conclusion. His birthday had passed, he was 8 years old, and he would only have 2 more years before he could embark on his own adventure. Mudkip had developed into Marshtomp and had mastered Mud Bomb, Take Down, Earthquake, Ice Beam, Dig, Brick Break, Surf, Whirlpool, and Waterfall. His Pokemon training was going well. Trico had also changed into Grovyle, and he was much faster now. He had also picked up a lot of new skills, such as acrobatics, grass knot, Bullet Seed, Detect, Brick Break, Double Team, Solar Beam, Energy Ball, Quick Attack, Leaf Blade, and Agility. Quick Attack, Lick, Smokescreen, Double Team, Ice Beam, Dig, Acrobatics, Surf, Waterfall, and Dark Pulse were among the skills Froakie acquired after becoming a Frogadier. With his mastery of Taunt, Fury Swipe, Close Combat, Acrobatics, Flare Blitz, Double Team, Flame Charge, Focus Blast, Incinerate, Rock Smash, Blaze Kick, Double Kick, Fire Punch, Focus Punch, and Heat Wave, Monferno was the one who excelled. His test went really well, and while he wasn't aware of it at the time, he not only passed with flying colors but also received the best possible scores. They all took a break from their studies and research to visit the Sky Pillar, which was a well-known location. Many Pokémon had made Sky Pillar their home, and there were rumors that a legendary Pokémon lived there as well. They were unable to locate the legendary Pokémon they were searching for, but Naruto managed to capture Banette, a ghost-type Pokémon whose playful nature occasionally made him too much for Naruto to handle and who was generally a troublemaker. During their stay at the hotel, Naruto, being the inquisitive youngster that he was, chose to spend some time exploring the city. As usual, he found a spot for his Pokémon to come out and play and summon them out of their Pokeballs. He then sat down beside a tree and fell asleep. He was startled out of his slumber when he heard a Pokémon in distress. He left his Pokémon there, didn't interfere with their games, and searched for the troubled Pokémon himself. After a short while, he discovered the Pokémon that was sending the distress signal. If he remembered correctly, it was Bagon, lying on the ground. Naruto checked and discovered that he was suffering from a fever. The blonde grabbed the Pokémon in his Pokeball and hurried to the hotel, thinking that two professors would know how to help it. His Pokémon sensed the situation and quickly followed him, their play move vanished. Naruto hurried into the motel room without bothering to knock. He called out, "Uncle Rowan. I need your help." Naruto rarely responded in this manner. If it had been a small issue, the youngster would have taken care of it himself. It must have been a significant one for him to act that way. Both of the professors there instantly became alert and stared at him. "What happened, Naruto?" Professor Rowan inquired. After Naruto explained what had happened and showed them the Pokeball, they both wasted no time in calling Bagon out of it. The fever was so fierce that their hands almost burned just touching it. Professor Birch said, "We need some ice." After sprinting to the kitchen, Naruto selected a big bowl, summoned his Marshtomp, and had him use a weak water cannon inside. The bowl was then frozen by an ice beam. He gave Marshtomp instructions to break the ice into smaller pieces before returning to them. Both professors said, "Thank you," and then got to work. "Here, I have some ice." With nothing to do, Naruto chose to go aside and wait outside the room. He leaned against the door and began tapping his foot impatiently. Finally, Naruto was called inside for what felt like several hours but was actually only 2. The Pokémon appeared fine, and Naruto could see that it was now at ease in its sleep. The boy sat beside him, keeping an eye on it. Professor Rowan chose not to ask any questions until Naruto was ready because he was currently too preoccupied with the Pokémon in front of him. The Rockhead Pokémon awoke a few hours later. It was nighttime, as it could be seen through the window, and he saw the boy sleeping with his head resting on his bed. Bagon was shocked when a human arrived to save him, knowing that it would have perished without assistance and that it was afflicted with a high fever following what was likely its 1000th failed attempt at flight. After a while, the youngster opened his eyes, and the first thing the Rockhead Pokémon saw, for someone he hardly knew, was pure, unadulterated worry. He abruptly remarked, "Hey, you are awake, are you alright now?" upon realizing that the Pokemon was once more conscious. The Pokemon of the dragon type bowed its head after jerking it back in surprise. Naruto smiled slightly, relieved that the Pokemon was okay. He looked at the clock and saw that it was 12 o'clock, which meant he had a few more hours to sleep. He left Bagon there to relax and went back to Red. The following morning proceeded rather swiftly. They all checked the Pokemon again, and Naruto asked Bagon if he would like to join his team after confirming his gender using a gadget scan. Bagon said yes. As their time at Hoenn drew to a close, they both learned a lot about Pokemon during their productive year there. Now that they were at the airport, they were heading to Johto as scheduled, and Naruto was carefully examining the twin EV eggs that Professor Birch had given him as a reward for performing so well on his tests and for taking good care of not just his but all the Pokemon. With his new year, new Pokemon, and new journey, Naruto grinned. He was essentially living his dream. Everything would have been ideal if he had been 10 years old. A month had passed since his arrival in Johto, and he could formally declare that he was tired of everything. He was studying under Professor Elm about the various special abilities of the Pokemon, and he was undoubtedly learning a lot, but occasionally Professor Elm would simply vanish, disappearing for days at a time. He was sometimes so focused on his studies that he would completely ignore everything else. Although he was Professor Oak's best student, he was also boring as hell, and he had a habit of giving lengthy and dull lectures. Naruto was clumsy and frequently needed assistance from him that he lost count. Uncle Rowan was of no assistance since he was taking too much pleasure in it. He was aware of Naruto's high level of activity and energy and deliberately made him listen to his colleagues' mind-numbing lectures. The only positive outcome for him was that the twin EV eggs that Professor Birch had given him for excelling in his studies eventually hatched into two healthy EVs, a male and a female. He occasionally trained his Pokemon in his free time, but he mostly let them play or train by themselves. Darkrai hadn't shown up yet, and he was already missing his friend. He continued to assist Professor Elm and his team in providing food and care for all of the Pokemon that resided there, as well as occasionally administering first aid. The Dragon-type Pokemon then requested that he train him to become powerful and be able to evolve quickly. By requested, I mean to nag him until he gave up. He was trying and failing to control Bagon's need to jump off a cliff, but he had at least reduced it to 3 or 4 times a day. He would constantly try to fight Naruto's Pokemon and challenge them to battle, and all of his Pokemon beat him up regularly, but it was becoming more difficult for them as well. And how could he forget his one Ghost-type Pokemon? That damned marionette Pokemon had made it his mission to frighten and startle Naruto whenever he had the chance. It was becoming really annoying, but the blonde could occasionally retaliate, but he was too busy doing other things to do so, so he mostly ignored him. The EV twins were rapidly turning into his nightmare. They began to gnaw on anything they could get their hands on, including their paws. Fortunately, their behavior was changing daily, although their propensity for mischief persisted. Though they were unable to keep them out of mischief, he was quite appreciative that his other Pokemon, Monferno, Marshtomp, Grovyle, and Frogadier, were generally calm and helpful to their fellows. He finished his studies and waited in the lab rather than playing with his Pokemon since he wanted to be present when he chose his partner. Today was going to be different from the norm because a new trainer was arriving to obtain his first Pokemon. The 3 starter Pokemon were already present: Chikorita, a grass type, Cyndaquil, a fire type, and Totodile, a water type. He had assisted in caring for all of them, so he knew they all had a lot of potential. Chikorita was adorable and enjoyed playing with everyone. Cyndaquil was a little shy, but that was nothing that a trainer Pokemon bonding session couldn't fix, and Totodile was, well, he loved to dance. He was more self-assured and strong than his fellow starters. A child about 11 years old arrived as Naruto was feeding them. He didn't even bother to knock and rushed in as if he owed the house. Naruto was genuinely irritated by the youngster's demeanor, but he dismissed it as excitement. The boy had on a red shirt underneath a sleeveless jacket, dark blue pants, and red shoes. Naruto thought, this boy sure loves red color, huh? When he noticed Naruto feeding the Pokemon, he rushed over and almost knocked him down. Move over, twerp, one of them is gonna be mine today, he remarked. You are really rude, you know. What is your name? Naruto asked the blonde lad as he adjusted himself and scowled. My name is Alan, next Pokemon Master, you better remember that, twerp, the boy remarked with a smug grin. His attitude was mocked by Naruto, who used his own words against him. My name is Naruto, not twerp, and you better remember that, he remarked. Anyway, Professor Elm should be here any moment, so who will you choose? The boy, now known as Alan, took another look at the 3 Pokemon and gave them a brief examination. He found that Totodile was the best choice because Cyndaquil was too much of a coward and Chikorita was too playful and immature for his liking. I will go with Totodile, others are too weak, stated he. The blonde was now formally furious, saying, weak trainers are the only thing that exist, not weak Pokemon. Oh really, and how would you know, twerp, you don't even have a Pokemon, the youngster jeered openly. I have more than you at the moment, Naruto responded calmly, taking a deep breath because he knew that anger would not assist him right now. He didn't want to brag, but the youngster didn't give him any other choice. Ah, you must be Alan, the new trainer here to get his first Pokemon, said Professor Elm, who entered the room in his typical awkward manner before Alan could respond. So have you already made a choice? Do you know which Pokemon are you going to choose? The boy nodded. Yes, Professor, I choose Totodile, he replied. Ah yes, he is a fine choice, though a little handful. Where have I put it? Ah, here, it is your Pokédex. It is also your Trainer ID and Pokemon Encyclopedia, giving you data on various Pokemons and their moves and special abilities, said the instructor of Pokemon, in addition to 5 Pokeballs. He handed him a badge case so he could save all the badges he earned. Unaware that Alan was following him, Naruto went off to take care of his and all of the Pokemon that lived in the lab's backyard. While there weren't many, the ones that did require care. He was feeding his own Pokemon when the older kid interfered. He brought out his Pokédex and exclaimed, Hey, what are these Pokemons? I've never seen them before. Pokemon, unknown, no information available, said his Dex's robotic voice for the majority of his Pokemon. He inquired, and where did you get them? After some internal deliberation, Naruto chose to provide an honest response to his query. For your information, that is Monferno, evolved form of Chimchar, a fire-type starter from Sinnoh. This is Marshtomp, evolved form of Mudkip, a water-type starter from Hoenn. That is Grovyle, evolved form of Trico, grass-type starter of Hoenn. This is Frogadier, evolved from a Froakie, water-type starter of Kalos. This is Banette. I caught him at the Sky Pillar. Then there are EV twins. Professor Birch gave me 2 EV eggs from which they hatched, and this is Bagon. I caught him just before coming to Johto, Naruto remarked. I didn't notice Alan's face turned redder and redder as he continued, and his jealousy was getting the better of him, as he showed the older boy all of his Pokemon. Oh right, and how were you able to keep those Pokemons, when you are not even a Pokemon trainer? He was almost about to scream, "While I may not be a licensed trainer, I have license to carry all these Pokémons, since I'm traveling with Professor Rowan of Sinnoh and learning from all of the regional professors," responded Naruto. He pulled out Totodile's Pokeball and stated, "I think you are so good, that you can carry Pokémon, then I challenge you for a Pokémon battle." "Didn't I just told you? I don't have a trainer's license, I cannot battle you," stated Naruto. He stated, "I don't care, you, me." Now, Naruto consented because he knew he wouldn't leave him alone until they had to engage in a Pokémon combat. "Sure, it will be a one-on-one battle, seeing as you only have one Pokémon, you can choose which one of my Pokémon you want to battle," the brunette replied quietly. "It's not like it would make a difference, how could that twerp make fun of him?" Alan gritted his teeth in rage. He would demonstrate. "All right, Totodile, I've decided on you," he said smugly, as the dancing water-type Pokémon emerged. "And as for you, I've decided to fight that Monferno of yours." "Going with the type advantage, huh? Sure, whatever you want," Naruto said, glancing at the fire-type Pokémon. "You up for a battle, buddy?" Monferno nodded happily. He hadn't had a good fight outside of the typical team sparring in a long time. Alan shouted, "All right, Totodile water gun." The tiny water type let out a strong compressed jet of water that was rapidly approaching the fire type. The fire type vanished underneath and then reappeared shortly behind it, his hand glowing, and struck the big jaw Pokémon directly. "Dig then Mach Punch, I want to finish this as fast as possible," he said. With a shaky gait, the Totodile stood up. It was obviously exhausted from that final maneuver. "It is really powerful to take a direct hit from Monferno's punch and still staying up," Naruto said. "But it's time to really finish it." Monferno Flare Blitz, as he could even command his Pokémon, the fire type approached it, engulfed in flames and hardly discernible. Alan could barely see his silhouette as he struck the tiny water type with tremendous force. Monferno suffered some little damage from the recoil and flinched, but Alan, who was gritting his teeth in rage while staring at his starter Pokémon, was unaware of it because the power of that move was sufficient to send the big jaw Pokémon flying into the tree, which it dented. This only made him more irate, so Naruto turned around and carried on with the duty that had been assigned to him. He also put his Totodile back in his Pokeball and walked away without saying anything. Time splash. 1 month had passed since his first encounter with that haughty trainer, and he was finding that things were going well enough. He trained all of his Pokémon harder than before because they all enjoyed it, and they practiced simulated fights. During this time, his Monferno had changed into Infernape, and the evolution of fire type only encouraged the Rockhead Pokémon to train harder, which is how he evolved into Shelgon just a few days ago. His EV twins were also demanding a tougher trainer so they could evolve as well, and Bennett was training at his own leisurely pace, but he was improving. He was now reading a book that included photos and general information on various evolutions. He was showing his EV twin the pictures and the information so they could select their evolutionary path. After much discussion with his Pokémon and careful consideration, he made the decision to ask Professor Elm for a Thunderstone, which is necessary for an EV to evolve into Jolteon, because his male EV was captivated by and adored Jolteon, while his female EV desired to become Umbreon. He put all of his Pokémon back in their Pokeballs, with the exception of EV, and went back to Professor Elm's lab. Since it was late at night and the sun had already set, both professors were there. He said to the regional professor from Johto, "Hey professor, do you have a Thunderstone with you? One of my EV wants to evolve into Jolteon," he said. The blonde saw that Professor Elm was more enthused than usual at the possibility of witnessing an evolution caused by a stone. Everyone seems eager to see one of the evolution. He said fervently, "Let me bring one," and then he went off to retrieve the stone, knowing that it would take some time before he found it. "Of course, Naruto, I have one in store. I am fascinated by these kinds of things, you know. Why do Pokemon evolve, how they evolve, why do certain Pokemon evolve only when in contact of a particular stone?" The Sinnoh Regional Pokemon Professor inquired. "So Naruto, how is your Pokemon's training coming along?" "It's going fine, uncle. We haven't been working on any new moves as I want the moves they already know to be perfect, but things are going along nicely." After Bagon evolved into Shelgon, both the EV twin were pestering me into training them so they could evolve too, so I took a book, which shows all the possible evolutions, so they could choose one of them. So here we are, as one of them wanted to be Jolteon, one of the EVs said, EVV, cheerfully concurring with his blonde trainer. Professor Elm came racing at that precise time, holding a thunderstone, and it appeared as though he was about to fall. Fortunately, he regained his equilibrium before moving on at a more leisurely pace. The professor said, "Here you go, Naruto, a thunderstone." Naruto gazed at the stone, knowing from the books what it looked like, but this was the first time he had ever held one in his hands. He then turned to face one of his EV, who was also observing it attentively, and asked, "Do you really want it?" even though he already knew the answer. EV nodded his head, and Naruto leaned down and reached out. EV placed his paw lightly on the stone. The results were instantaneous. He began to change his shape, and a second later, Jolteon took his place. When Naruto requested that Professor Elm's assistant use his device to scan his freshly evolved Jolteon, the assistant consented. A mechanical voice then yelled, "Jolteon, the lightning Pokemon, which is a male Pokemon with the abilities of Volt Absorb and Quick Feet. When Jolteon is angry or scared, the hairs on its body turn into needles that are aimed at its opponents. Jolteon can absorb charged atoms and generate 10,000 volts of electricity." Now that EV was looking at his trainer, Jolteon gave him a full force return when he saw him smiling. Naruto rubbed his fur tenderly and lovingly, but only after a few rubs did it become charged with static electricity, making the blonde's wild hair even more spiky. He laughed softly, which caused everyone to smile slightly in return. To get his trainer's attention, the other EV, now only one, yapped. The youngster took up his lone female Pokemon and put her on his shoulder. He primarily addressed Uncle Rowan, who was his guardian while his mother was away, when he said, "Well, for EV to evolve into Umbreon I have to train her in the night, so I will see you sometime later." The professor said, "Naruto, don't stay up too late and return after 2 hours." "Sure, Uncle Rowan," he replied. "Let's go, Jolteon." "Jolteon," the lightning Pokemon said, and proceeded to follow his trainer. At the very least, it was quite quiet at night in New Bark Town. The peace and stillness was truly amazing, and it gave Naruto a sense of peace and odd joy as if he were a part of the natural world. When they arrived at their regular training area, Naruto summoned all of his Pokemon and instructed them to exercise. He would initially concentrate on EV, but no one complained, and they would then begin their designated work. He looked at the Pokemon in front of him and asked himself, "Anyway, now what to train you in? I know, there is a move called Moon Blast. It is like Solar Beam, but instead of sun, it absorbs power from moon. Are you ready to give it a try?" he asked, receiving a nod. "For you to absorb power from moon, you first have to feel moonlight. Well, I actually don't know how to describe it, but you will feel it. I know you can, so give it a try," he concluded. After a few days, Eevee wasn't even close to evolving. After a few days of nighttime training, the Moon Blast learning process was moving very slowly. He didn't know why, but he didn't make any real progress teaching it to Eevee, and he never had this much trouble teaching any of his Pokemon any moves. He kept encouraging Eevee and didn't let her give up, and he would support and help her no matter how long it took. After a while, Eevee had improved and was able to absorb moonlight, but it was quite challenging to turn it into a beam. Then he realized that his Grovyle had recently learned Solar Beam and could assist her. He greeted his lone Grass-type Pokemon, "Hey Grovyle," and asked, "Could you come here for a moment?" The Pokemon Wood Gecko approached his trainer. The Grass-type Pokemon nodded and said, "Grovyle, Eevee is having some trouble learning Moon Blast. Would you help her? It's really similar to Solar Beam." After training with Grovyle for a while, Eevee eventually learned Moon Blast. Naruto picked her up and nuzzled her, and the female Eevee purred with joy. The blonde also gave her some poffins and a berry as a reward. Eevee felt all of her energy returning to her body and growing alarmingly, and she began glowing. No matter how many times he witnessed it, Naruto continued to gaze at her changing shape since he always found it intriguing to see a Pokemon evolve. The Pokemon didn't look like anything he had ever seen before after evolving. It had pinkish ears, tail, and feet and was mostly covered in pale cream-colored fur. It had two bows, one on its left ear and one around its neck, from which two feelers were attached. The bows were pale cream with pinkish centers, and the feelers were pale cream with pinkish and blue tips. It had short, slender legs and small paws, each of which had 3 visible toes. Its eyes are blue with white pupils and no sclera. Naruto called these bows feelers, and the newly evolved Pokemon blanketed his trainer with them, sending a calming aura. He expressed his happiness at his Pokemon's eventual evolution by saying, "Wow, you evolved, and into a Pokemon I've never seen before." Looking at his sole female Pokemon, Naruto saw that although her eyes were full of optimism, they were also filled with fear of rejection, worry that her trainer would not want her, fear that she had changed into something he didn't want, and fear that she would leave like a freak. He didn't know how, but he knew those feelings all too well. "You are really beautiful," he began. "Do you fear that I would throw you away?" The expression in her eyes spoke for itself. Naruto sighed. "Don't be afraid, no matter what, you are my family, and we took care of each other and never abandoned them, and no matter what, you don't turn your back on your family," he said. The blonde gave her a small smile, which the newly evolved Pokemon returned. After putting all of his Pokemon back in their Pokeballs, he headed for the lab, saying, "Now let's get back to the lab, Uncle and Professor must be waiting for us." They were still there as usual, talking about something that Naruto either completely disregarded or didn't care about. "Hey Uncle Rowan, guess what, my Eevee just evolved," he announced. "Oh really?" Professor Elm, who was readily captivated by the idea of evolution, replied. "Can we see it?" After saying, "Sure," he called her outside the Pokeball. Everyone there, with the obvious exception of Naruto, gasped as they saw a Pokemon they had never even heard of. Professor Elm asked, "What kind of Pokemon is this?" As he took up his Pokemon and held her, the youngster questioned, "She evolved from Eevee, isn't she beautiful?" Uncle Rowan said, "Yes she is," but he was more intrigued by the kind of Pokemon his Eevee had changed into. Needless to say, he had never seen that specific type of Pokemon before. Professor Elm, who at this moment was only speaking to himself, voiced the rhetorical question, "Amazing, Could she be the eighth possible evolution of Eevee that we knew nothing about? He had also pulled out his documents and was making notes on only Arceus knew what. It is quite late in the night, he said, yawning. Can we go to sleep now? After Rowan gave a nod, Naruto put her back in his Pokeball and went to bed. The following morning Naruto woke up early that morning since he knew the professors would question him extensively about his recently developed EV. Now that he thinks about it, he hadn't really chosen what to call her because her species wasn't yet called. The professors and his assistant were already there, debating what might have caused the new development, what kind it was, and other things. They saw Naruto and invited him to participate in their discussion. The ever-excited Professor Elm said, "Well, Naruto, are you going to tell us how the evolution actually happened?" "Well, I had read that when an EV is trained enough and at night is exposed to moonlight that it will evolve into Umbreon, so I taught her Moon Blast, 'cause you know the whole absorbing the moonlight thing." Everyone agreed, but it didn't go as expected. I was feeding her some berries and poffins as a reward when she evolved. And that's about it, he continued. A few hours after finishing his studies, Naruto headed to his daily duties of feeding and caring for Pokemon before beginning his Pokemon training. The professors nodded and thanked him for the information. After a few months he saw that most of his Pokemons were speed-oriented and that someone could easily find a way to neutralize them, so he began training them in move resistance and durability, as well as the moves that could give them the advantage over their opponent when they are in type disadvantage. It had been several months since his EV evolved into Sylveon, a name he had given, when they realized she was the first of her kind. He had already taught her a lot of moves and was working on her speed alongside everyone else's. His newly evolved Swampert was immune to electric-type attacks because he had already learned Thunder Punch, but he was vulnerable to Grass-type attacks 4 times. Fortunately, he had learned Ice Ball and Ice Beam. His Grovyle was fast enough to avoid most Fire-type attacks, which was his main weakness, and he had learned Dig and Rock Slide. Frogadier was weak to electric-type attacks, and the only move that could help him against them was Dig. His Sylveon was a different story. He didn't know what to teach her, so he started making up new moves and telling her to trust her instincts. Shelgon was rapidly becoming his powerhouse. He was a dragon type, so his attacks were powerful and he had learned a variety of moves, but he won't be able to learn many dragon-type moves until he evolves. His studies were going as well as he had planned, his Pokemons were doing well, and Naruto had once again vanquished Alan, this time in a 3-on-3 combat. Rewind, I challenge you to a Pokemon battle, this time 3-on-3, Alan said. It would be good warm-up before my match in Johto League. After considerable prodding, Naruto was able to get Uncle Rowan's approval to officiate the match himself. Alright, this will be a 3-on-3 battle between trainers Alan and Naruto. Anyone can switch Pokemon during the match. This match will end when 3 Pokemon on either team will be unable to battle. Do you both understand? He asked with both of them nodding. As the challenger Alan will choose his Pokemon first, said Rowan, the referee. Ursaring, I choose you, Alan said, and the Pokemon that hibernates, Ursaring, emerged. It screamed immediately, and even though Naruto was aware of its intestines, he chose to use it because he thought it would add interest. Naruto called out, Jolteon, I chose you, and said, you can have first chance Alan. Alan said, Ursaring Fury swipes, calmly. Naruto murmured, let it come then Thunderbolt. When the hibernating Pokemon approached the lightning Pokemon, it flinched when hit by the Thunderbolt, allowing Jolteon to easily avoid the impending attack. Naruto said, Jolteon Pin Missile, as a number of needle-like projectiles shot from his Jolteon's body and repeatedly impacted his opponent's torso. Ursaring didn't even bat an eye, but instead appeared more energized. Alan publicly made fun of him, saying, "Ha, these little attacks won't even scratch it. You will have to do something better." Naruto scowled at his actions. It was obvious that they didn't like one another. "Then what about this?" Jolteon Sand Attack then Thunder. The Pokemon charged his most potent electric-type move while flinging sand at his opponent. Alan remained silent while he awaited the precise moment. It took Jolteon only a few seconds to charge the strongest electric-type move before lightning struck the hibernating Pokemon. It roared in pain and rage but was still able to fight, the electricity running through its body, and it attempted to move but was paralyzed before its ability kicked in. Alan grinned as the crimson aura encircled its body and its eyes went red. This was the moment he had been anticipating. Ursaring's intestines had come into play. Recalling the lighting Pokemon, Naruto said, "Jolteon return," and selected another one. "You always wanted a tough battle, right? Here is your chance," he said, pressing the button on the Pokeball to make it larger. "It's you turn Infernape," he said. The flame Pokemon emerged in all of his fiery splendor, towering over its pre-evolution form at a remarkable 3 feet 11 inches. "Let's heat things up, Infernape Flamethrower," said the flame Pokemon, releasing a stream of flames that was far hotter than anything he had ever experienced. He was definitely putting in a lot of training. The Hibernator Pokemon was able to evade the assault by using the status-enhancing move, now Hammer Arm, and Ursaring Dodge, then Bulk Up. Naruto said, "Infernape Close Combat," without displaying any emotion. The Sinnoh Fire-type starting Pokemon was incredibly fast, much faster than his opponent, and avoided dealing any physical harm. It kicked and punched the sleeping Pokemon, causing it to become so irritated that it began fighting without hesitation. Alan shouted, "Ursaring, pay attention to me, Hyper Beam." Thankfully, he paid attention and expelled the legendary Hyper Beam. Without wasting any time, Naruto commanded, "Infernape Overheat," a more potent fire-type attack. The blonde capitalized on the fact that Pokemon require time to recover after utilizing such a potent move when the two attacks met and exploded in Infernape Flare Blitz, an amazing display of power. Infernape's body was coated in blue flame as he charged at his opponent, appearing to be a blue missile due to his incredible speed. Ursaring was hit so hard that it was flung back a few feet. Infernape's body was encircled by red sparks as he suffered damage from recoil. The hibernating Pokemon struggled to stand up, and his activated ability had disappeared. Alan clenched his teeth, realizing that things were not going as planned, but he was unable to respond before Naruto announced the next attack. Infernape Finish It with Overheat. Ursaring was too exhausted to avoid the powerful fire-type attack, which was notably weaker than the previous time. The professor announced, "Ursaring is unable to battle, Infernape wins," and Rowan became the referee. Alan yelled, "Blastoise, I choose you," to his second Pokemon. "Going with the type advantage again, it's not like it had helped you before," said Naruto. Alan called out the strike, Blastoise Water Gun, without bothering to use a reply taunt. Infernape dodged then Flame Thrower, it said, as a jet of water rushed toward the flame Pokemon from its cannon. Infernape dodged the approaching onslaught with his superior speed and returned fire in retaliation. Blastoise Withdraw, Rapid Spin then Hydro Pump, Alan said. The shellfish Pokemon pulled back into its shell, began spinning quickly, and simultaneously ejected a massive volume of water, which encircled it and rendered it impervious to fire-type attacks. It was now time for Endurance Pokemon to enter the battle. Infernape Return, Naruto whispered softly, returning Infernape with his Pokeball. Shelgon, I choose you, he replied. Alan said, Blastoise Hydro Pump, now Dragon Dance, the words read. Protect yourself with hidden power. The two attacks clashed, but neither could win because their powers were equal. The shellfish Pokémon launched its most potent attack, Blastoise Hydro Cannon, and targeted the Endurance Pokémon. Dragon Pulse at full power, he said softly, knowing that if the assault made direct contact, it would cause difficulties and do a lot of damage that Shelgon would not be able to bear. It would be an understatement to say that the two attacks collided in the middle of the ground and caused an explosion, Blastoise's sheer strength, in contrast to Shelgon's Dragon Dance, enhanced Dragon Pulse. The Dragon-type Pokémon was irritated by the outcome, to put it mildly. One of the primary issues with stronger attacks was that if your Pokémon wasn't properly trained, it would take a long time to recover or recharge from such a move. Shelgon used another Dragon Pulse. While it recovers, thankfully, it was still able to utilize the defensive move, Blastoise Withdraw, as the shellfish Pokémon drew within its shell to defend itself against the approaching Dragon-type attack. When the blonde ordered, Shelgon Flamethrower and keep at it, his opponent did nothing and allowed Blastoise to recoup the strength it had lost. Alan was taken aback when the Endurance Pokémon, which was ejecting strong flames, charged at his Blastoise. He was unable to order his Pokémon, and it was struck. Now keep the flames and charge Zen Headbutt, he said. The water type was sent a few feet back by the force of the attack, and the blonde wasted no time in coming out of his shell. Shelgon finish with Dragon Rush, said the Endurance Pokémon, who slathered his downed opponent with Dragon-type energy and struck the water type hard, preventing it from rising this time. The referee declared, Blastoise is unable to battle, Shelgon wins. Gritting his teeth, Alan put his Pokémon back at the ball. Naruto had not yet lost a Pokémon, but he had lost two. Alan's final Pokémon yelled, Feraligatr, I choose you, Naruto said, so your Totodile evolved, not bad. When his opponent's Pokémon used both Dragon Pulse and Dragon Rush, Alan deduced that it was a dragon type, and ice worked well against dragons. You will see what he is actually capable of, Ice Beam, Alan said. This time, the Ice Beam totally overpowered the dragon type and delivered a powerful strike. Shelgon counter with hidden power, now finish with Ice Punch, Shelgon said. Before he could recover from the previous blow, the big jaw Pokémon appeared in front of him, its fist covered in ice. The small dragon type fainted due to the combination of the water type's innate power and the extremely efficient attack. Jolteon, time for battle, Naruto said quietly as he handed back his Pokémon and considered his next move. Alan said, Feraligatr, start things with Hydro Pump, his initial assault. Jolteon Thunderbolt at the incoming Hydro Pump, then dodge, the lightning Pokémon said, charging at the incoming move with a powerful electric assault. The water from the Hydro Pump impacted the water type, conducting electricity, and he dodged the attack in the interim. Naruto was astonished that the big jaw Pokémon was not severely damaged by the electric assault. Jolteon released a remarkable amount of electricity in a wide arc that spanned a large area. Naruto stated, Jolteon discharge quick, meaning that if the Thunderbolt was insufficient to harm the water type, the wide area attack would have to be used. Alan yelled out the following strike, Feraligatr, Blizzard, in a strangely calm voice. Knowing it was pointless, Naruto said, Jolteon return, and put the lightning Pokémon back in his ball. Infernape time to battle, he said. Alan said, Feraligatr Hydro Pump, without saying anything. The flame Pokémon, Infernape Dig, then Flare Blitz, used the fire-type attack to avoid the oncoming strike. The ground was becoming too hot for Alan to handle, so he became agitated and lost his composure. "Feraligatr hydro pump in the whole ground, drew that monkey out," Alan said, and the big jaw Pokemon did exactly that, soaking the entire area. "Don't give him a chance to recover, use Mach Punch in close combat," the fire-type Pokemon said, pressing his advantage and attacking the water-type with the Mach Punch/close combat combo. "Infernape, come on out and Mach Punch," the fire-type Pokemon said, still faster. Now that both Pokemon were panting, it appeared that Infernape had been severely harmed by the wet area. Feraligatr Rain Dance, the water-type launched a ball of brief energy toward the sky, and clouds started to form right away. Infernape counter with Sunny Day, the sun gleamed brightly once more as the clouds dissipated. Alan tightened his jaw since Naruto always managed to get back at him. "Feraligatr Hydro Pump once again," he shouted frantically, aware that his Pokemon was always bad and exhausting. The fire-type was swift enough to dodge the approaching water-type assault and strike his opponent again with the fighting-type move. "Infernape dodge with quick attack, then Mach Punch," he said. Feraligatr Hydro Cannon, his water-type Pokemon, fired at the fire-type and charged the attack much more quickly than Blastoise. Infernape dodge once again, then Thunder Punch. Alan was caught off guard by the electric-type attack, but it was too late. The extremely powerful strike made the already exhausted water-type wince. "Now finish this with Flare Blitz," the assault said, and the fire and water types both passed out from the strain. Both Infernape and Feraligatr are unable to battle. This is a tie, but since Naruto still has one usable Pokemon, he wins. The end of the flashback skip time. After the defeat, he had not seen his opponent's hair or hide. The year had gone by more slowly after that, and Naruto was at least busy with his studies, exams, and Pokemon training. His birthday had already passed, and he had received a number of gifts from the professors and new clothes from his mother. He had hatched the little fellow and assisted Professor Elm in caring for the egg, but he hardly ever left his side and screamed if someone else even came near him. He had made a new buddy in Larvitar. Before departing the Johto region for Kanto, their final destination, they planned to take a well-earned holiday at Alto Mare.